The last few seconds down to re-entry. At this point, there's very little anybody can do, including the astronauts, except wait as they come in through the uppermost fringes of the Earth's atmosphere. The computers put them on course. All anybody can do now is cross their fingers.
Apollo Control, Houston, we've just had loss of signal from Honeysuckle.
And they are coming in faster than predicted. They're coming in just about as fast as any spacecraft has returned from space before. The last few seconds now to re-entry, and they've lost them on the main radio contact antenna in Australia at Honeysuckle Creek. Just about now, they should be going through the moment of maximum heat. And we'll only know whether or not that heat shield was damaged by the explosion 3 days ago, when they come out of radio blackout in just over 2 minutes.
30 seconds to go for blackout. Less than 10 seconds now. We will attempt to contact Apollo 13 through one of the Orion aircraft. Continuing to monitor this, Apollo Control, Houston. We've had a report that Orion 4 aircraft has acquisition of signal.
They're through.
Odyssey, Houston, standing by, over. Okay, we read you, Jack. That was Jim Lovell responding with the OK, Joe.
There they are.
There they are. They've made it.
On April 17, 1970, at 1:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, after 142 hours and 54 minutes of some of the most harrowing spaceflight in the history of NASA, astronauts John Swigert, Fred Hayes, and Jim Lovell safely made it back to Earth after so many talented people put all of their effort in getting them back home after an extremely damaging explosion to their spacecraft that should, honestly, have ended their mission in a tragic way, but instead, because of their talent and the talent of the people on the ground, they got back safely. I had the opportunity to meet Jim Lovell in the early 1990s while he was promoting Apollo 13 and his book Lost Moon, and it was a rare and unique experience to meet such a charming man who had had such incredible experiences in his long and full life. Rest in peace, Jim Lovell. Even though this episode wasn't about him, I thought that it was only appropriate that we mention him as we also talk about exploring something new, something unique, and something truly remarkable making its way through our solar system as the quest for knowledge that Mr. Lovell was such an important part of continues. Good afternoon, alien enthusiasts, and welcome to another Angry Alien Bulletin, once again talking about 3I Atlas, something that I anticipate I'm going to be doing on this channel for a considerable amount of time, several months, as this thing makes its way through the solar system, simply because this is a unique event, a very, very strange event from an astronomical standpoint, even if this is a natural object. And by the way, I still think that the evidence indicates that there is a strong possibility, actually a probability, that this is a natural object. It's a bizarre natural object, a unique natural object, regardless of what the mainstream scientific community, NASA, astronomers, whatever, are trying to tell us at the moment. It's a little disheartening, a little frustrating to see the reports that have been coming out from NASA and other sources talking about the remarkable aspects of this object, and then in the same breath saying that this object is behaving precisely as we would expect a comet at this distance to behave. It is such a disappointing approach to this amazing and exciting moment for science because, in my opinion, the whole reason that they're trying to tone down the response on this, trying to suggest that this is behaving just like we would expect a comet to behave, etc., is because they don't want to be lumped together with all of the alien conspiracy theorists or whatever. They don't want to feed into that narrative at all. So as a result, they are completely disregarding all of the strange things about this object, all the things that make it mysterious and bizarre and unique, because they don't want to feed into the narrative. It's absurd. It's so counter to the very nature of scientific discovery. We should be excited about this. Everybody should be excited, regardless of whether you think that it's an artificial object or not. It's an incredible moment. If we just want to talk about the speed of 3I Atlas, that alone is a very bizarre thing. As fast as it's going, it suggests that if it is natural, it must have been around for a very, very long period of time. The longer an object is orbiting the galaxy, the more its speed tends to vary or differ from mainstream objects that have come into existence or were born in more recent times. And by more recent times, I'm talking 3-4 billion years ago, like our own sun. But in addition to that, as fast as this thing is blazing through the solar system, that creates an interesting mystery as well. Because any object going this fast, if it collided with even a tiny asteroid, a tiny meteor, something along those lines, the consequences for this object, big as it is, would be utterly disastrous, cataclysmic, really. It would probably shatter it. And yet, this object clearly hasn't shattered. It seems to be quite intact after a journey of billions of years. That in itself is also a bit of an unlikely event. It also suggests something very interesting from the artificial side of things that we have observed about this object that suggests why perhaps it hasn't been struck by a random rock over all this time. A team of astronomers has taken the sharpest ever picture of the unexpected interstellar comet, yes, I'm quoting NASA here, 3I Atlas, using the crisp vision of NASA's Hubble Space Telescope. Hubble is one of many missions across NASA's fleet of space telescopes slated to observe this comet, together with providing more information about its size and physical properties. Hubble's observations allow astronomers to more accurately determine the size of the comet's solid icy nucleus. Keep in mind, icy, remember that statement because it's important. The upper limit on the diameter of the nucleus is 5.6 kilometers, so a little more than half of the original estimated size according to the Rubin Space Telescope, although they say that it could be as small as 320 meters across. By the way, that would make it maybe around the same size as a Oumuamua, a bit larger. That makes no sense to me, and I don't see how it makes sense to anybody else. This thing is so bright that we can see it at this enormous distance beyond the orbit of Jupiter, and yet it's only that size, whereas Oumuamua and 2I Borisov, for that matter, neither of those objects were anywhere near as bright, even though they were roughly that size. And also, NASA makes it very, very clear that even Hubble can't actually see the nucleus, so it's difficult to determine exactly how big it really is. NASA also says that Hubble captured a dust plume ejected from the sun-warmed side of the comet and the hint of a dust tail streaming away from the nucleus. Hubble's data suggests a dust loss rate consistent with comets that are first detected at around 300 million miles away from the sun. This behavior is much like the signature of previously seen sun-bound comets originating within our solar system. That is completely untrue. They admitted that this is a dust tail streaming towards the sun. It's ejected from the sun-warmed side of the comet. Therefore, it's a tail pointing towards the sun, which is highly, highly unusual for any comet, regardless of when it got detected. Very frustrating to see NASA talk this way, as if this is just an everyday event, an ordinary comet that just happens to be coming from an interstellar destination and is going very, very fast. So let's see what Avi Loeb has to say about this. I know I have to keep going back to him, but he seems to be the only one who speaks honestly about this topic. Let's go ahead and quote one of his most recent articles. Quote, "After being interviewed on 2 long podcasts, as well as on Fox, CNN, and CBS over the past day, my immediate realization was that scientific conclusions should not be decided by authority or by conformity, but instead vetted by properly analyzing data. No possible interpretation should be censored. We must be open to the possibility that new data on interstellar objects does not reflect the same science as past data on solar system comets. This recognition should motivate us to get as much data as possible about a new interstellar object like 3I Atlas and be agnostic in the interpretation of its anomalies. The simplest way to tell the difference between curious scientists and dogmatic scientists is to give them more data. Curious scientists would love having as much data as possible that could change their views, whereas dogmatic scientists will get upset if the data disproves their favorite theory. 2 recent papers declared detection of spectral features of water in the spectrum of 3I Atlas. So again, that icy nucleus that NASA talked about, but the evidence is not clear at all. One paper reports optical and near-infrared spectroscopy of 3I Atlas obtained with the Gemini South and NASA IRTF telescopes on July 5th and 14th, 2025. The optical spectrum shows a red slope with a reddening of approximately 10% per 1,000 angstrom between wavelengths of 0.5 and 0.8 microns. This closely resembles the reddening observed in typical D-type asteroids, implying that this part of the spectrum could originate from the solid surface of 3I Atlas. In that case, the brightness of 3I Atlas implies a diameter of 20 kilometers. As I showed in my first paper on the subject, this size is untenable because the reservoir of rocky material in interstellar space can deliver at best a 20-kilometer rock every 10,000 years. In contrast, 3I Atlas was discovered after surveying the sky for less than a decade. This puzzle is alleviated if the trajectory of 3I Atlas was designed to target the inner solar system, namely, it is not a rock, but a technological object. This interpretation gains traction from the fact that the path of 3I Atlas is aligned to the orbital plane of the planets around the Sun, an unlikely coincidence at the level of 0.2%. By the way, all of that gets much more unlikely if you look at the fact that this object is going to pass within 1 astronomical unit, less than 1 AU actually, from Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. An extremely unlikely event, as I have mentioned before. But let's go ahead and continue with what this paper tried to claim. The authors attempt to fit the observed spectrum using a model that includes a mixture of 70% rocky material as found in the Tagish Lake meteorite and 30% of water ice particles. They claim that this mixture fits the noisy data, but a close inspection shows that the characteristic spectral features of water, and by the way, let's have a look at a graph of this. The red line is the characteristic spectral features of water, frequently go in the opposite direction to the data, which is the black line, where they observed. The observed flux, or black line, rises at wavelengths where the water model, or red line, declines, and vice versa. The authors did not conduct a standard statistical test to demonstrate that the model fits the data better than a smooth line with no water features. This is standard practice for making a statistically significant claim. Yet the title of the paper declares unequivocally water ice in the coma. The second paper also concludes in its title, Water Detection in Interstellar Object 3I Atlas. A closer inspection shows that this claim is unsubstantiated as well. In the left panel of their data, the authors plot the inferred water production rate as a function of the assumed level of reddening at wavelengths around 0.3 microns. If we adopt the level of reddening measured in the first paper mentioned above, namely 10% per 1,000 angstroms, then we derive from this plot a water production rate of 0. Instead, the authors adopt a much larger value of reddening from another paper and claim detection of water. A simple reddening curve of dust predicts a mild variation of the reddening with wavelength, which violates the drastic increase in reddening assumed by the authors below a wavelength of 0.5 microns. Remarkably, the spectrum reported in the first paper implies no water production based on the second paper, and yet both papers claim that water was detected around 3I Atlas. And yet, who is getting all the criticism? Who is getting attacked by the community of astronomers, and who doesn't get their papers peer-reviewed and published? It's Avi Loeb, and not these people who are presenting unsubstantiated and very bold claims that are not backed by the data. So what lesson can we draw from these two papers? Even when analyzing data, some scientists derive strong conclusions without a firm statistical basis, just because these conclusions conform to traditional thinking that 3I Atlas is a water-rich comet. So it's safe to claim detection of the expected, but raw curiosity about the unexpected, well, that's a precarious thing to do indeed. But let's talk about this object's speed and the significance behind that, because I'll tell you, this I found to be pretty surprising, almost as surprising as doing a side-by-side comparison of how fast this thing is going compared to the ISS. At a relative speed exceeding 60 kilometers per second, any impact on the surface of the interstellar object 3I Atlas would release an amount of energy that is tens of times larger than a TNT explosive with the impactor's mass. So in other words, if you had a 20-meter asteroid colliding with 3I Atlas, it would produce an energy equivalent to 20 megatons, and order 1,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs. The resulting explosion would cause tremendous damage to an interstellar object, even if its diameter is 1,000 times larger than that of this impactor, namely as large as 20 kilometers. If 3I Atlas is a rock, then it will shatter to pieces as a result of such a powerful collision in the solar system. Nature does not mourn devastated rocks, as rock collisions are a common natural occurrence. For example, the moon is believed to have been created by a collision of a Mars-sized object called Theia with Earth about 4.5 billion years ago. This was followed by the large, heavy bombardment of asteroids that were demolished on the surface of Earth about 3.8 to 4.1 billion years ago. But if 3I Atlas is a spacecraft, or perhaps an asteroid ship, something along those lines, then its makers probably would have been concerned about its long-term survival as it passed through asteroid belts of planetary systems like our solar system. 3I Atlas is currently, right now, passing through the main asteroid belt of the solar system, a torus-shaped region at a distance of a few times the Earth-Sun separation. There are about 1 trillion rocks bigger than 20 meters inside this region, posing a potential threat to the integrity of 3I Atlas. To protect an interstellar spacecraft of that scale, its creators might have designed it to spray a stream of particles ahead of it as precursors that would flag any dangerous rock along the path, allowing the the craft to navigate away from the obstacles. The use of a radar system might have been avoided to eliminate an obvious electromagnetic signature of artificial origin. Large enough particles, well above a micron, a millionth of a meter, would not be pushed back by solar radiation pressure or the solar wind, as is the case with smaller particles in common cometary tails. This is because the repulsive forces scale as surface area or size squared, whereas the particle mass scales are size cubed. Hence, large particles moving ahead of the front of 3I Atlas could create a buffer zone leading it. If this zone measures roughly the diameter of Earth, 12,756 kilometers, it would amount to a few arc seconds on the sky, which happens to be the characteristic angular scale of the glow in front of 3I Atlas at its current distance. And by the way, the yellow and green arrows that you see at the bottom right of your screen, that is the direction that a cometary tail should be going if it adhered to the typical anti-solar direction that 99% of comet tails travel in. But instead, this thing is going in the opposite direction, a halo leading the object rather than trailing behind it. And we've also learned that this object does seem to be rotating, meaning that there doesn't appear to be an area of the nucleus that's receiving more solar energy than any other part, meaning an equal amount of dust should be radiating from this object and trailing behind it rather than advancing in front of it. That should only happen if the object is not rotating and getting a lot of solar radiation on its leading side, and also if it has a lot of explosive outgassing pushing the debris and dust and gas, etc., in front of the object, and we have seen none of that in any of the data thus far. Let's go ahead and continue. The interaction of the sprayed particles with potential obstacles would give an advance warning of a few minutes to 3I Atlas at its measured hyperbolic speed. A buffer zone of large particles would show up in images of 3I Atlas as a glow of reflected sunlight ahead of the interstellar object. The glow will not be accompanied by any gas particles, as they would be pushed back by the solar wind and hence be useless for the purpose of flagging dangerous rocks ahead of 3I Atlas. This scenario is consistent with the current data on 3I Atlas. The Hubble Space Telescope image shows a glow that extends out to a few arc seconds ahead of the object, and spectroscopic measurements show no evidence for molecular or atomic gas accompanying this glow. On the other hand, what would be the most plausible natural origin explanation of the current data? The observed forward glow could be produced by a dust-rich interstellar asteroid which release mostly large dust grains on the sun-warmed day side. In this scenario, the observed reddening in the spectrum of 3I Atlas also implies the existence of small dust grains, but these smaller dust particles should have been pushed back by solar radiation to trail 3I Atlas, yet there is no evidence for a cometary tail of dust and gas behind 3I Atlas. Without small dust particles, the reddening must be explained by the red surface of a 20-kilometer object. For now, we cannot assess with any confidence whether 3I Atlas is a natural, dust-rich comet with no gaseous tail on an extremely rare trajectory, or perhaps a technological object on a path that was designed to align with the ecliptic plane of the planets around the sun. Irrespective, the observed fact is that 3I Atlas is passing through the asteroid belt right now as a result of the rare 0.2% probability alignment of its retrograde path with the ecliptic plane to within 5 degrees. On top of that, the arrival time of 3I Atlas along this path is perfectly timed for a close encounter with Mars, Venus, and Jupiter with a 0.00 0.05% probability. This coincidence would allow a mothership to release mini probes that will reach planets as they move into the mini probes, taking advantage of the mothership's retrograde motion. Unfortunately, 3I Atlas will hide behind the sun at its perihelion on October 29th of 2025, so we will not be able to observe whether it releases any mini probes into Earth's orbit. On the lobe scale, as Avi has created recently, where 0 refers to a definitely natural object and 10 implies a definitely artificial object, I currently rank 3I Atlas as a 4. As we gather more data on 3I Atlas in the coming months, my rank might sink to 0 or rise to 10. Science is fun because attending to facts allows us to discover the unexpected. So yes, once again, all very intriguing. I want to continue to emphasize that based on everything that we have seen from this object, in spite of all of the strangeness of it, we haven't seen anything that screams technosignature. It isn't blasting out any signals. Of course, we haven't tried to signal it yet. I can only imagine the amount of controversy that would explode if somebody were to make the decision to blast out a radio signal at 3I Atlas. Of course, would add a lot of credibility to the people who are adhering to the artificial object hypothesis, and that is the last thing that astronomers want to do. But regardless, no artificial signals. It hasn't changed its velocity, slowed down, increased in speed in any manner that is non-gravitational. All of its movements seem completely consistent with an object moving through the solar system under the influence of various objects within the solar system, of course, mostly the sun. So all of that being the case, I think we still need to assume that this object is quite probably natural, but still, given all the strangeness that we have seen, it is still very, very irresponsible, in my opinion, to dismiss an artificial explanation. And once again, hopefully, if Juno gets diverted, if NASA makes the decision, the very inexpensive decision that will really damage nothing about Juno's mission overall, if they make the decision to intercept 3I Atlas, I think that's the only way that we're ever really going to put the controversy about this object to bed. But we'll learn so much more about interstellar objects anyway if we do this. There's absolutely no reason to not divert Juno, and it is my sincere hope that we put this controversy to rest once and for all by sending a probe to intercept it that is otherwise scheduled for disposal anyway. There is no reason to not answer this question definitively once and for all, and also learn a lot about things that we have yet to experience up close and personal. Regardless of what 3I Atlas might be, it's an object unlike anything else we have ever observed in our solar system. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd like all of you to take a moment to just remember Jim Lovell and his incredible accomplishments. As I said in the course of the video, I had the opportunity to meet this man in person. It was just a wonderful experience, a really, really intriguing individual, and did so much to promote the exploration of our solar system, the exploration of the moon, obviously, and other things that Jim Lovell was engaged in during his life, especially his crusade to try to get us back to the moon. Hopefully, that is something that will be fulfilled in the next few years. So all of us make sure to keep Jim Lovell's family in our thoughts at this moment. He lived a long and full life, but we're still very much going to miss him. So until next time, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.